Welcome to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. If you have problems with the IRS, don't focus on the negative, focus on the solutions. With the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish. For over 15 years, he's been helping taxpayers with IRS problems reclaim their lives and their financial stability. Now, here's your host of the IRS Solution Attorney Show, Darrin T. Mish.
Welcome to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I am the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish.
I can verify he is. And I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell. Welcome to the show. Welcome back this week.
It's yet another beautiful day in the neighborhood.
He says that every week. He watched too much Mr. Rogers when he was a kid.
You know, but Mr. Rogers was always rocking the killer cardigan sweaters.
Yes.
Now, that brings up a very important issue.
We loved Mr. Rogers when we were a kid. My mom hated it.
Now, why are cardigan sweaters not in style? I don't think I have any anymore. They haven't been in style in a while.
No.
Right?
Early, like, was that 80s or 90s? I'm trying to remember.
It's probably more like the 70s with a little bleed over into the 80s. I was a Catholic high school boy, so used to have to dress up. Had to dress up to go to school, and so I had my share of cardigans because, you know, it was kind of cold at times where I lived, and sometimes you needed a little, you know, something to keep you a little bit warmer.
Indeed.
Anyway, I kind of like that preppy look. But anyway, today we're going to have a show, and we're going to talk about why right now is the right time to end your IRS problems. Right now.
Right now. Right this second.
Today is the best day in history. Tomorrow may be slightly better, but today is the best day in history to solve your IRS problems. And it's actually true, and there's actually some reasons. We're going to get into those reasons a little bit later on in the show.
A lot of our questions and our content from the show actually come from things that you see in the field. So real-life stories, real-life questions, and all that kind of stuff. So if you have a question, you can call 888-404-1010, 888-404-1010. You can also call Darrin's office
at 888-438-6474. That's 888-GET-MISH, 888-438-6474.
Which I think for most people, unless they listen to the station all the time, 888-GET-MISH is probably easier to remember.
Yeah, that's G-E-T-M-I-S-H. There's no C in the name. It's G-E-T-M-I-S-H. So, you know, I've been representing clients with tax problems for a long time.
A couple years, anyway.
In fact, it was Bill Clinton was the president when I started. And don't get me rolling on the Clintons, but
I was going to say, in this day and age, you can't just say Clinton because you never know what that
might Bill
mean.
Clinton was the president, and so what I've seen is I've seen ups and downs, I've seen trends, I've seen different things occur, and I have this philosophy that I'll share with you, and this philosophy has proven to be pretty true. And without injecting my political opinion, here's what I see happening.
Yes, please do not do that. I try to keep you so far removed from that.
Here's what I see happening, and that is Democrats raise taxes and do less to collect them, and Republicans tend to lower taxes and do more to collect taxes that are due.
Right.
So regardless of who wins the next election, it's not even material because
I personally think they should do away with political parties and just have people that run. But, you know, that's not the way our government's set up.
Now, who's talking about politics now?
I'm just saying. I'm saying in general,
Okay.
I think they should wipe political parties.
Okay, so for right now, since Barack Obama is still the president, we're in a situation where the federal government's in a mood to help taxpayers. And I'll give you a concrete example, and this is why today is the best time in history to settle your tax problems. We talk about offers and compromises quite a bit here on the show, and an offer is where you make a deal to settle for less. And the way an offer is calculated is by a relatively simple math equation that goes like this. And then I'll give you an example. Monthly disposable income times 12 plus your assets equals the amount of your offer. So let me give you an example. If you had $100 in monthly disposable income, 100 times 12 is $1,200. Let's assume that there was no assets, so you could theoretically settle this hypothetical case for $1,200. Now, back before, I think it was 2012, that equation was different. That equation was actually worse for the taxpayer, and it went like this. Monthly disposable income times 48 plus assets was the amount of your offer. So in that same $100 a monthly disposable income figure, our offer would be $100 times 48 equals 48, you know, assuming no assets, equals $4,800. So in other words, the IRS took 75% off when they changed the rules in 2012. And I can remember when that rule change came down, I was really, really cynical. I didn't really think it was going to happen because it just seemed like it was almost too good to be true. And I'm here to tell you now, 4 years removed, it's not too good to be true. And really, our success rate with offers and compromise in particular went sky high because they made it easier to get deals through.
So staying away from the politics side, do you think, regardless of who gets into office, that it's going to stay that way, or do you think that's going to change?
I think there's a reasonably good chance. Well, I'm going to get into the politics. I'm not going to inject opinion. Okay, I'm not.
Okay.
So if Hillary Clinton were to win, it's probably going to stay the same. If Trump were to win, it's probably going to change. I can't tell you how it's going to change, but it probably will change.
Because and the why is the tax debt?
Yeah, usually when you have a change in political party, lots of things change. Now, it took Barack Obama or his administration 4 years to make that rule change, but they eventually did. So I think that if the parties change, there probably will be change eventually in the offer and compromise program. Now, think about why they made that change. They made that change because they're trying to encourage people to come in from the cold and to get back into the tax system. We've talked about this many, many times. The average person who doesn't offer and compromise is a non-filer and has been out of the system for quite some time. One of the prerequisites to getting an offer accepted or after acceptance is they have to file and pay and remain on course for 5 years after the offer is accepted and paid. So that virtually guarantees that person's going to get back into the system. They're going to be paying their Social Security taxes, they're going to be paying their income taxes, and they're going to be solidly back in the system. And I would venture to say most people who get an offer and compromise through is going to count that as their one lucky break and not be a recidivist. I'm sure I have actually represented some recidivists, but
there's always exceptions.
There's always exceptions, but I think most people are going to be like, wow, man, I caught a
take it and run.
Yeah, I owed $100,000. I got away for $2,000. That was my lucky break. It was my one freebie for life, and so they're going to stay on the straight and narrow.
It's funny. I was looking at our outline too, and it's one of the facts and one of the things that we have on here is nearly 50 million people. 50 million people every year find themselves in some type of an IRS tax predicament where they owe money and they don't have the money to pay it. And with that being said, a lot of your clients show up later and I wonder if they think, okay, yeah, the IRS has just forgotten about me and they're not going to catch up with me, but that's really the case. Isn't that true?
We tend to have two types of clients. We have the type that this whole thing is just really bugging them, and so they're going to go out and proactively seek help. And they want a solution. They're taking an active role in finding the solution to the problem. The second kind of person is the person that's going to be reactive. So they're going to wait until the stuff actually hits the fan. They're going to wait until there's a lien, a levy, a wage garnishment, a bank seizure, all these things. They're going to wait until all that stuff happens, and then they're going to go looking for help. Now, here's why it doesn't make sense to be the guy in number two. Well, if you've just had your wages garnished and you've just had the IRS vacuum out all the money in your bank account, what resources do you have to go and hire help?
What do you do for that client, Darrin, when they come in and they want to hire you, but they have no money because the IRS just took it all?
I only know one way to be, and that's honest. And in those people,
they sell stuff.
In those people's cases, I'm not gonna take care of their wage levy. I'm not gonna take care of their bank levy without getting paid first. I'm just not gonna do it.
I mean, nobody works for free, so they would have to sell something, right? Theoretically, is that what happens? Or somebody loans them the money?
Yeah, they get a loan from their, from someone, and they get it taken care of. But a lot of people in those situations just have nobody left. They sort of tapped all their resources, and I just can't help them because, they're just these people haven't been paying their taxes to the most feared collection agency in the world. They're not going to pay me after I get their levy released, and I've stuck my neck out. It gets chopped off every time.
Right. Now, the interesting thing, we were talking about how it's a good time to actually strike a deal with the IRS or let you help somebody strike a deal with the IRS. But everybody knows our government deficit is ridiculous. So I don't see this staying the same. I know you think it depends on who goes into office, but I think we just owe too much money.
Well, okay. Assuming that is a true statement, I'm not sure that makes sense. Because would you rather have zero and have the person stay out of the system for some indeterminate length of time into the future? Or would you rather have 2 cents on the dollar and get them back into the system right now?
Correct. But you said they changed the formula, right?
They did.
So that's the
I don't know. I don't know if the formula is going to get changed back or not. I hope it doesn't because, quite frankly, it's really good for business right now because there's really good programs available for people, and I hope it stays the same or gets even better. I don't want it to get too much better, then people wouldn't need me. But right now it's a pretty good time to take care of it, and I think part of it is it's really that issue. They just want to get people back in the system.
And when we come back in just a minute, we're going to give you some tips also on when is a good time to actually prepare to make that appointment and come in and chat with you. So if you stick around, we'll be back in just a few minutes with the IRS Solution Attorney Show, and we will discuss that in just a moment.
You suffering from IRS problems? Do you owe back taxes you can't pay? Is your paycheck or bank account being levied? Or maybe you haven't filed tax returns in years and simply don't know what to do. This is Darrin Mish to tell you that if you're tired of IRS problems hanging over your head and are ready for a fresh start, we may be able to help. Call the law offices of Darrin Mish at 888-GET-MISH, 888-GET-MISH. I can help you file old tax returns, work to release tax liens or stop wage levies, even negotiate deals to pay off back taxes at a discount, sometimes for pennies on the dollar. Hey, let's face it, these days it's not hard to get into tax trouble. A divorce, failed business, health problems, you name it. The point is, IRS problems may be solved if you're willing to take the first step. Call for a free consultation at 888-GET-MISH. That's 888-438-6474. Or go to the web at getirshelp.com, because the one sure thing is, IRS problems don't solve themselves. So get Mish. 888-438-6474. Principal Office, Tampa.
Welcome back to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I am the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin Mish.
And I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell. And for once, I think in almost the whole time we're doing the show, we are actually on the same spot in the outline. That's lovely.
Absolutely. Today we're talking about why right now is the right time to end your IRS problems for good. And it really is the right time right now in history. The IRS has a lot of lenient programs in place, and that's what we're talking about
And
today.
timing is everything.
Yeah, a lot of people will tell me stories when they come in. I say, we have actually on our intake form that you fill out in the lobby, we have some questions, and one of the questions is, why haven't you already dealt with this? And a lot of people tell me, because I was trying to get my money together so I could settle it. Well, that's exactly wrong thinking, and here's why. It's far easier to settle your tax debt for pennies on the dollar if you're in a bad financial situation. And that's because if you think about what an offer in compromise does, it measures your ability to pay. Do you want to have a higher ability to pay or a lower ability to pay?
Right, but I can understand why someone would think that's the opposite.
I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying that it's
No,
wrong.
it's interesting to get that information.
Because if you have a war chest of $20,000 and you owe the IRS $100,000, well, then guess what? Your offer is going to start at $20,000. Versus if you don't have that $20,000, we might get it settled for $1,000 or $2,000 or some smaller number.
What other things do people put on that, just out of curiosity, when you ask them why they have not settled their IRS issue yet?
It's really a valuable question because it gives you insights into the market and to that particular person. But we hear things like shame, embarrassment, procrastination,
QuickBooks crash.
fire, flood, hurricane.
What's the most wild one you ever got?
Oh, I don't know. I'll have to think about it.
The dog ate my tax form.
See, I've been a lawyer for over 20 years, okay? So just part of my natural makeup now, my mental makeup is I discount all excuses from myself and from everyone else. Like if I hear you start to give me an excuse about something, my brain literally goes to white noise and I just stop.
Shuts off.
Yeah, like I don't want, it's great that everybody has a reason why things happen, okay? But excuses are so rarely useful, in my opinion. Now, I could be wrong, but in my opinion, excuses are not usually that useful. So I kind of turn off. I just zone out. I don't want to hear it so much. And it's not that I'm unsympathetic. It's that it's not going to help us get to where we want to go. So I don't want to waste a lot of time on it. There are a lot of people who want to come in and sit down, and they want to spend their 30-minute consultation. They literally want to spend the time telling me why they're not a bad person for owing so much taxes. And I try to stop them quick and say, look, I don't think you're a bad person, period. I don't care why you owe all the tax debt. It literally, in my mind,
it doesn't matter.
There's no correlation. There's no correlation to good person or bad person equals big tax debt, low tax debt, no tax debt. There's no correlation. It doesn't matter.
Do you think they're afraid that maybe as your attorney you might judge them as a person and represent them differently? Do you think that's why they start with the explaining?
Maybe. And I think that's logical. I don't think it's right. but I think it's understandable why people might think that. But
but half the battle is understanding their position.
Yeah, and yeah, that's true. And some of it is my own experience. So I was a criminal defense lawyer for like 7 years. I heard every excuse in the book for every crime you can imagine, and I couldn't spend any of my own emotional bandwidth judging those people because it's not your job as a defense attorney. It's not my job. My job is like figure out how to put the puzzle back together so I can get you off. Period. Like whether you're a good person or a bad person is of no. Particularly in that job, it's of no relevance. Doesn't matter.
So what about for the person listening? They're like, I really want to settle this, but I'm just afraid of all these horror stories that I've heard, that they're going to seize my bank account, they're going to come get my car, they're going to do whatever they want to do just for fun.
Well, prior to 1998, the IRS actually did do what are called punitive seizures. So they would seize your car for fun. They used to call them Seizure Fridays, I think. And
oh, snap.
Yeah, so literally, there's a great book out there, and I can't remember the name. I'll try to remember it, but I think it's called Confessions of a Revenue Officer. And in that book, and I've spoken with the author before, he tells stories about how literally all the revenue officers over in Lakeland, Florida would get together, and this is happening all over the country. They would get together on Fridays, and they would ride around, and they would just go pick up they'd literally ride around with the tow truck drivers, and they'd hook up taxpayers' cars, and they'd seize them. And they weren't seizing the cars to sell at auction, like to make the money, because car seizures are relatively rare because cars are not of, you're not going to make a lot of money seizing a car because usually there's a lien and stuff on it. But they would do it to just get their point across. Hey, you don't want to mess with the revenuer, And eventually in 1998, that stuff all came to a head, and Congress, radically overhauled the tax code in terms of taxpayer rights, and they can't do that anymore. So they cannot do what's called a punitive seizure. A punitive seizure is when the IRS is doing something where it's unprofitable. They're seizing something and it's unprofitable. By definition, if it's unprofitable, it was done for punitive reasons. Punitive means punishing.
Yeah, just because.
Yeah, they were doing it to punish you. Well, that's not a revenue officer's job. Is not to punish you. A revenue officer's job is to get the money. So if you think about that, their job is to get the money, and there's all these procedural safeguards that were put into place in 1998, then there's not a lot to fear in most cases, because if we put together, a logical plan, then we're going to make, by definition, we're going to make sure that you don't get, levied and seized and all that kind of stuff. But in some cases, people come too late, and they're already right on the cusp, or that's already happening. And those cases are obviously harder.
And they've already seized their bank account or taken their stuff?
Yeah, they're going through levies, and now it's a lot harder to unring the bell. And so those cases are more difficult. Most of the time you can still take care of it and you can still get it resolved, but it's harder. Once you already have a revenue officer and he's already seizing things, you jump in at the 11th hour and you're like, hey, wait a minute, hold on, stop, don't do that. Sometimes it's harder to get him to slow the train down.
So off topic, but do they still locally have those IRS auctions where they resell things? Because remember, didn't they used to advertise we're reselling the drug dealer's Corvette, we're reselling their house?
The IRS actually has a mailing list. It's actually the U.S. Treasury has an internet email list of all the auctions that occur of all property seized. So it's not just vehicles, but real property and office equipment and stuff like that. So
they just send it to auctioneers to be generally auctioned?
Yeah, they send it to auctioneers, and it's kind of like your typical government. Have you ever looked at a federal government auction? There's paperwork and stuff.
Of course. Anything in the government's going to have some paper.
And I can tell you that for real property, for real estate, there's a right of redemption period. I believe it's 180 days. And so what that means is the taxpayer has 180 days after the auction to come up with the money and get the property back. Well, what does that do to the price? Drives the price down. Because who in the right mind wants to buy real property and they have to sit on it for another 180 days?
That's with anything, though. Foreclosures, IRS.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that during that 180 days, you're not going to make any improvements. You're not even going to clean it because, the odds are, it depends on how much the person owes, I suppose.
Not to mention title issues. People can actually stake claim to that.
Yeah, there's all kinds of reasons why that drives the price down, and it's generally not in the government's best interest to seize things that aren't going to make them a significant amount of money. Over the years, I've seen some seizures of things. Knock on wood, I've never seen a primary residence seizure of one of my clients. I've seen
They'll take that beach condo, though.
I've seen some. I've never even had a second house seized, but I've seen some commercial buildings seized over payroll taxes typically. So the building, like a daycare or something, owns the building free and clear. They get behind on their payroll taxes, and they can't figure out how to get them paid, and then the building gets seized and sold at auction. I have seen that.
Makes sense to me. Should we hop on into questions from our listeners? Are you ready? It's a little early for that, but should we? Is any closing thoughts on this?
Well, the one thing is that the IRS revenue officers used to be rewarded based on how much money they collected. Post 1998, they're rewarded basically not financially, but they're rewarded internally based on how many cases they close.
So their pay structure changed?
I don't think their management definitely has changed.
Incentives.
Okay? So they're measured based on how many cases they close, not how much money they collect. And so that's a really interesting thing to know too, that even if you're broke, this is not a bad time to try to resolve your tax problems. It's actually probably the best time. Because in an offer and compromise scenario, what I'm doing is I'm trying to paint a picture that you're so broke that you're never going to be able to afford to pay. So let's paint that story or paint that picture, tell that story, and get it done while you're in this down trough.
Exactly, and do it now because everybody has something they can sell, and honestly, if you're in that mess, you're probably going to sell something anyway. That's just my thought.
A lot of our clients actually have to borrow money from friends or family to get their offers, fully funded. But we're not talking about a lot of money here. And there are some, I have never used them, but there are some companies that will actually loan you money to settle your offer and compromise.
Oh, my gosh, that's scary. All right. Well, you're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. We are not recommending you borrow money to settle that IRS problem, but we will help you get it resolved. You can reach Darrin at 888-GET-MISH.
That's 888-438-6474.
We'll be back in just a minute. Stick around. Welcome back. You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. Here with Mr. Host with the most.
The IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin and Mish.
Just trying to throw him off a little bit. I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell, and our topic for today's show is, why is right now the perfect time to end your IRS problem? And we chatted a lot about that, and surprisingly, I love one of your questions. When people come into the office, you ask them, why now? Why have you been waiting?
Yeah, and we get a lot of different answers there. We get procrastination, embarrassment, shame, anxiety, don't know what to do. Get a lot of different answers there, but it really kind of helps us frame where that person is emotionally and mentally and wanting to deal with their problem, because quite frankly, I don't like to work with people who are not motivated to get their problem solved, because if they're not all in, if they're not completely committed, then they're harder to represent.
And you can't always help somebody that's not willing to do it. I know for me, that's like you saying, hey, I want to buy a house. Well, how motivated are you? Like, if you don't want to save the money so I can help you, and you're not ready to look at properties and get your inspection and do everything it's going to take, and if you're getting a loan, the lender's going to ask for a lot of stuff, by the way, I can't do that by myself. You have to do it. And it's no different than a tax problem.
Or even in your business, if they're trying to sell, if they want you to sell their house,
that's
and
right.
They won't even clean the place.
Yeah, well, you know what? I have an answer for that. We have to price it for what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and I actually like looking at, when I was in the market for buying a house, I liked looking at houses that were kind of not perfectly staged, because that meant I was probably going to get a better deal.
No, it's not even a matter of being staged sometimes, Darrin. Sometimes it's a matter of the yuck factor.
I was being diplomatic. And
I'll just say it. What my pet peeve is? I don't think I've told you this. I don't think I've ever said it. If I have, you can call me out. But, when I go into a house and the baseboards are so nasty, they've never been wiped down, that's one of my biggest pet peeves as an agent. I've never said that, have I?
No, I've never heard that. But, human beings have different standards and different, acceptable limits. Most men, this is a stereotype, but most men would probably never look at the baseboards. Come to think of it, the baseboards here in the studio are not real clean, and I had never noticed. But
and the dirty toilets.
But I hear you. Looked at some places that were over the years, looking to buy that were not real great. But I don't think it's intentionally done. And it's kind of the same situation here, is that people just have to decide if this is the right time for them to resolve their tax problem or not. Right now the IRS is more likely to try and help you if you're struggling financially than if you're just the kind of guy who just, wants to get away with paying less tax. I have a lot, because I have such a big social media presence, I have a lot of people that come from that, that venue. And I'm friends and personally acquainted with lots of pretty successful people. And I get a lot of questions about, I have a $50,000 tax debt. Okay, fine. How much money do you make? $500. Well, okay, I'm probably not going to.
How often?
Yeah, I'm probably not going to be able to do that anything for you because you have the ability to pay. But versus if you owe $50,000 and we can show the IRS that you earn $50,000 a year, which is not a crazy scenario. The IRS is just in a situation right now, and who knows how long this will last, that they're more than willing to deal with you right now.
So that's why if you're listening to the show or you know somebody that has this issue where they haven't filed returns in many years or they owe a huge chunk to the IRS, this is really a good time to take the first step, call Darrin, let him walk you through the process and explain what some of the options are.
I've said this on the air before. I'm not a puzzle guy. Like if you said, tonight after dinner, family, we're going to put together a puzzle here on the dining room table, I'd probably bow out of that one. And the reason is that's what I do for a living. Is I basically solve puzzles all day long, every day, all day. I like that part. I like taking real life scenarios, and this is one of the things that's actually hardest to do after you get out of law school. Is you take real life scenarios, you identify what the issues are, you apply the law to those issues, and you come up with a conclusion with a resolution.
And I can see, like, with all due respect, that's why some attorneys are good and some attorneys are not, because it's like the difference between the common sense and the book sense. Like, they could be perfect, straight A student in law school, get the highest grade in the class, but if they can't mesh up, like, a common sense approach to a real life scenario, it's going to be hard for them to figure out how the law applies to that situation.
Yeah, and I think communication is just epically important. Communication. If you can't communicate with your client, if you can't understand what the client's definition of a win, what the client's definition of success is, then you're going to have a lot of unhappy clients.
Agreed.
So you've got to understand what that is, and then try to over deliver to really truly be successful in this profession. In my opinion, I'm going to tell you, I'm not the best, smartest, book smart lawyer out there, but I get really good results.
But that's the thing. I think sometimes the people with the most common sense are the most productive and can be the most successful, including financially.
Yeah, I consider myself to be a people person that actually just knows this one little sliver of the law really well. And I love applying that sliver of the law to real people and their real problems. Because you see them so often. You see the marital problems. I literally have some prospects right now that told me that they are separated and probably going to be divorced in large part due to the tax problem. Well, that breaks my heart. I mean, seriously, it's like, let me get in there and, like, let's get working on this. Yeah, let's fix that stuff. And then maybe if everything goes well, you can rekindle that spark that caused you to be attracted to each other in the first place, and you can rebuild that.
Right.
But, yeah, it really makes me sad to think that people get divorced. And I understand, because I'm married too.
Well, then the number one reason for divorce is financial stress.
I understand completely. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about helping people with these kinds of problems, is to help alleviate that stress, because I believe that life was we're here to live, and we're here to enjoy. We're not here to stress and freak out. And I'll, to be totally forthright, I have my share of stress and freakouts.
Everybody does,
but that's not what we're here for. That's
it's how you handle it. It's how you live.
Exactly.
All of those things. All right, so let's dive into some questions from listeners, shall we?
We shall.
So the first one is from Susie. Thanks for listening, Susie. She wants to know if I claim my daughter, who is a full-time college student, as a dependent, can she claim her own personal exemption when she files her return?
No, she can't.
Think not.
You can't double dip. You don't get both. So what you really should do is you should talk to your daughter, and y'all should compare notes to find out how it makes the most sense. Who to claim the exemption. I think you need to be careful though, because for various student loan reasons, or even some employment benefit reasons, you might want to continue to claim the child on the tax return, even health insurance perhaps. You might want to claim that child as a dependent.
Well, they're getting very sticky with a lot of that stuff, including health insurance, and they ask more and more questions than ever before. Have you noticed that?
I think when I was a college student or law student, I think my parents claimed to me, in part because they actually were providing more than 51% of my my room and board, but also because there were certain I got flight privileges because my stepfather was a captain with an airline, And so if I was independent, then I'm not sure I could have flown for free, and that would have been horrible.
See, that's why you don't know how to work the chainsaw, because your dad figured was a pilot. Now it makes sense. I'm just saying, you might be able to fly the plane, but you can't operate the chainsaw. Just kidding. Different topic.
I can take off and I can fly the thing. I'm not that great at landing, and I think landing is kind of crucial. Landing's actually hard. Landing is not super simple. Now, here's kind of a short story about flying. Now he's actually he works in the flight simulator program in Atlanta and helping to train Delta pilots in the simulator. And so I've been there and I've flown in the simulator and stuff. And so on one occasion, it's a 737 sim, and we had set it up so that I could take off out of LAX and as a captain. And so I did it, and it was really realistic. You know, the plane banks, it makes noise. It's like completely legit. And then we try to land, and I need help because, like, I'm going to crash. And crashing the sim is even bad. So we land it. And then, like, a week or two later, I'm sitting in a 737 taking off out of LAX up towards the front of the plane. And I was thinking to myself, man, this ain't so hard. I've done this before. I've taken off out of LAX before. I just can't land it. Good thing we're going somewhere else.
Oh, my gosh.
So what's the next question?
So our next question is from Greg, and he wants to know, how much does an unmarried dependent student have to make before he or she has to file an income tax return?
All right.
Good
so
question, Greg.
I'm gonna pull a ripcord here and say it depends. Okay.
Here we go.
The answer is in IRS.
Where's that attorney disclaimer? You can go ahead and play it now.
Can you see my parachute? I just pulled the ripcord. Actually, the answer is in IRS Publication 501. I don't have enough information to answer the question here. But in IRS Publication 501, which you can get at irs.gov, that's irs.gov, you can find IRS Publication 501, and the answer shall be revealed to you.
It should be a rap, the irs.gov.
The irs.gov.
I think there's a song for that.
Oh,
anyhow,
probably.
So we have a news story. Let's hop into that. I don't know who this is, but Nene, I don't know who that is, leaks that they owe the IRS nearly $830,000. Who is that?
So she's one of the former Real Housewives of Atlanta.
Oh, I don't watch TV, so that answers that.
Now, here's my big question about Nene. There's that pop song right now that's something like "Show Me Nene." I can't. I'm drawing a blank here.
We'll have to try to find that song.
Yeah, I wonder if that's who it is. But anyway, she owes a lot of money to the IRS. And really, I can't say she should call me, but I've represented celebrities and athletes and whatnot before, so this might be kind of a fun case.
And rock stars.
Oh yeah,
We've talked about that.
Some rock stars, for sure.
You know, Real Housewives, rock stars are all in the same.
I had
boat there.
an R&B singer call me. That's a household name. I did not represent her, and I can't even remember her name, so there's no fear of divulging who it is. But she's like an R&B singer that's a household name. That, like, if you said her name, you'd go, oh, well, she's been around forever.
Yeah.
I've actually had that conversation.
So, real quick story. What's this IRS extends deadline for 401k rollovers? What is that?
Well, savers who miss a 60-day deadline when moving their individual retirement accounts or workplace retirement plans, such as 401ks, can now have a second chance. The IRS on Wednesday said that IRA owners and retirement plan participants who inadvertently exceed a 60-day limit when moving their accounts during a rollover can receive a waiver of the deadline. Without these waivers, the amount in the IRA or retirement plan would often be taxable, and many account holders younger than 59.5 years old would owe the additional 10% early withdrawal penalty.
And on that note, we're going to have to take a break. And you can finish explaining when we come back. You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. When we come back, we'll talk about why the IRS extended the deadline for the 401k rollovers, and we'll recap that back in a minute.
Welcome back to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. I am the IRS Solution Attorney, Darrin T. Mish.
And I'm your co-host, Katrina Madewell. Thank you for sticking with us through the break. And the whole topic pretty much for today's show is all about why right now, even though you think you don't have the money, is the right time to actually figure out how to settle this IRS problem you have. Right? In a nutshell?
That is what the show was about. But right before the break, we were talking about the IRS has actually extended the 60-day rollover deadline for certain circumstances for people to get waivers, like if they blow the 60-day deadline for rollovers for IRAs and 401ks.
So in short.
And I think you wanted to know why would the IRS do that. And I can tell you that I've seen I've seen some pretty bad things happen when people either, are a day or two late because they just didn't calculate the deadline correctly, or even more commonly, they do the rollover and they just can't prove that it went through on time.
And don't put it in your name.
And I think the IRS is just trying to show some humanity here, which is kind of surprising. But on occasion, if they see too many unintended results, they'll actually change the regulation, change the law. They can't change the law, but they can definitely change the regulation and the way things are handled in the Internal Revenue Manual.
So if you've missed any part of the show, if you want to catch it in its entirety, or you want to catch up with Darrin Mish, you can get him at 888-GET-MISH.
That's 888-438-6474. You can visit our website at getirshelp.com. We have the podcast. We have the app. There's all kinds of ways to hear more of myself and Katrina at any time you would desire.
Facebook ping, you can Twitter, you can tweet at Darrin_Mish.
Pinterest, we're on Instagram.
What the heck are you Instagramming with an IRS issue?
Everywhere. Oh, pictures of my kids.
I was going to say, all right. So you can go get friendly with Darrin at Instagram, but he won't be posting. I guess you could post pictures of some of these boring IRS notice numbers, but
You know what I could do is I could take pictures of happy clients after their problems are solved. Before the problem was solved, they had wrinkles on their faces and they looked beaten down and downtrodden.
Smooth
but after,
out.
they look perfect. They look like they've had a facelift.
Well, you could put, zoom in on the letter, just real quick on that number, and then the happy face of the client and the final number. That would be kind of cool.
Okay, so by way of waiver, I was engaging in hyperbole just now. That's not true. You're not going to have a facelift after your IRS tax problem is solved, but you're going to feel a lot better, most likely.
They'll feel like that. They'll
Absolutely.
feel like that. So, about that time.
This is the segment of the show that we call the IRS Train Wreck of the Week. And the reason we call it that is people come in and their tax situation is just a train wreck. And typically, after they've come in and seen us and hired the firm and we've resolved the problem, they come out much better off. So in today's segment, we're going to talk about a client who actually, the strategy was we basically just ran out the clock. So in basketball, when I was a kid, this was before I think it was before the NBA even had a shot clock. But one of the things they taught us as young kids is that since there was no shot clock in basketball, if one of the strategies was if you could keep the ball on offense away from the other team, they couldn't outscore you.
Right.
Right? So you would just play what we called four corners. You'd basically just pass the ball around on your half of the court forever until they got the ball or you took a shot. And it was you're basically just running out the clock. And you would do that if you had a good lead and you just were trying to make the game be over. You see it in football quite a bit. Usually in the fourth quarter.
They're running down the clock.
They're running the ball to keep the clock running. Well, that's what we did in this particular case. As you recall, there's a statute of limitations for collections. And what that is there's a time clock. And the time clock is generally, there are exceptions, generally 10 years from the date the tax is assessed. So you can think of the tax being assessed on the date either that you filed a tax return with a balance due or the IRS did an audit and they added money to your account. So basically it's 10 years. Well, this particular woman came into the office and she's a great lady, really like her a lot. And we were able to identify that, hey, you have a very short period of time on the statute of limitations. And she owed on the liens, she owed $89,712. Now, the liens don't actually have an accurate amount. That was the tax penalty and interest when the lien was filed. But this lien had been filed for many, many years. So it was probably 130 to 150.
So that's saying that number is much higher.
Yeah, the number was way, way higher than what was on the lien. And what we decided to do is we identified that, the best thing for her to do, this is rare, but the best thing for her to do was nothing. The IRS wasn't bugging her. She had moved down from up north to Florida, and that was the best thing to do, so was just do nothing. And we knew because we'd done the power of attorney and we got the transcripts, I was able to ascertain exactly when the statute of limitations expired.
I'm listening to that Rascal Flatts song in my head, days go by.
Yeah, so every day that went by was just another day closer to ultimate freedom, right? So long story short, we outlasted the statute of limitations, and then we very politely asked that the IRS release the tax liens, both in this jurisdiction down here in Florida, as well as up in New Jersey, where she actually owned a second home. She owned a second home with equity in it in New Jersey. The IRS was not able to identify that in any meaningful way. And just talked to her yesterday, and she had actually, we got the lien released, and the balance was completely zeroed out. And she sold the home recently up in New Jersey and has a little bit of equity in her pocket. And so that's a situation where I didn't do anything illegal, unethical, or immoral. We just played the game.
So at what point, or did the IRS realize the clock actually ran out and they dropped the ball?
I think the computer actually zeroes out the transcript, automatically. But typically those liens are not going to be released until somebody makes a demand, or actually we're going to call it a request. Until somebody requests that the liens be issued.
Sorry.
And so,
Time's up. Can you let it go? Let it go.
You're even a redhead. So
just having some fun today.
That's what happened is they issued releases to the tax liens, and she came out smelling like a rose.
Oh, we had way too much fun on today's show. You're listening to the IRS Solution Attorney Show. You can get Darrin at 888-GET-MISH.
That's 888-438-6474. Or you can visit the website at getirshelp.com.
Catch up with him on Twitter and on Facebook. He's kind of fun there. We'll be back same time, same place next week. So this week,
your